Welcome to Torah Today Ministries. My name is Grant Luton.
And I'm Robin.
And we're here to discuss Torah portion Beha'alotecha, which is Numbers chapters 8 through 12.
A lot of chapters.
A lot of chapters and a lot of amazing things to talk about here.
There are.
So
I don't even know how we're gonna select. So hopefully God will decide what we should spend this time talking about today.
Well, this has probably the most difficult name to pronounce of any of the 54 Torah portions, Beha'alotecha. And it's usually mistranslated there in verse 2, speak to Aaron, say to him, when you kindle the lamps, Beha'alotecha. But that's not what the word means.
It doesn't have to do with when you elevate.
It means when you elevate yourself to the lamps, toward the face of the menorah.
Let's start with that. Why does that matter?
Well, whenever we are lights in the world and we're serving the light of the world and we're providing light to the world, we actually are elevating ourselves. We are to be lights of the world. Mm-hmm. And what does the master say? Nobody lights a lamp and puts it under his bed or under a bushel basket.
Right.
He sets it on a lampstand. And we're to be like a city on a hill, not in a valley.
But we're not supposed to allow something to cover that light.
Right. And so we're not there to promote ourselves, but so that, as again he says, let your light so shine among men, mm-hmm. that they may see your good works, mm-hmm. and give glory to your Father in heaven. So our light is something that we want people to see, but not to notice us.
Let's talk about, just for a second, the nature of light. What is unique about light? And why is light the thing that God has ordained to really represent His presence in this world?
Well, light is truth.
Yeah.
That's what it always is.
And it's
light
eternal.
It's truth, and it's eternal. When you light a light, that light goes out into the universe, and it never stops. It goes forever. And here's the thing, it hit me. I remember the first time we had a big Hanukkah gathering at Beth Tikkun, and people brought in their menorahs, and they're all so unique and different. Some were big, some were small. Some were made out of expensive materials, others were just very inexpensive and plain. And all these menorahs were different, and they were beautiful. But once they were lit and the lights, we turned off the lights in the room.
All you see is the light.
You don't notice the menorahs anymore. All you notice are the lights. And
the humble ones and the extravagant ones, it doesn't matter.
And so it made no difference how beautiful the menorah was. Once it was lit, you didn't notice the menorah. You noticed the light of the menorah. That's what you saw. And so if we let our light shine, we actually draw attention away from ourselves, not to ourselves. We're just a vessel for the light. We are servants of the light. So the light's not there to make us look good. We're simply there to serve the light and let God shine it out into the world through us.
Well, some of my thoughts as I was pondering this portion, and we always do this at the beginning of the week, so we don't even have a ton of time. These are my initial thoughts, but this lampstand was placed in the holy place, the sanctuary, the meeting place between God and His people. And I think that one of the pictures that is important for me personally is that our homes, our lives should be a sanctuary, and our homes should be a sanctuary, a place of meeting, a place of light, a place of peace. And a friend of mine sent me a message this week, and she says, I was looking at Proverbs 9:1, where we're told that wisdom has built her house. So there's that place of habitation, and she's honed out her 7 pillars.
7 pillars.
Well, there are 7 lights on that beautiful menorah. And why does wisdom carve out 7 pillars to uphold and support her life? Well, we've talked about it before. Obviously, the number 7 is the number of perfection. It's a transcendent number. But she took me to James chapter 3, and she was reminding me that wisdom from above is defined for us, because it's like, well, then what does that light look like from above that we are supposed to shine to the world? And the things that are listed here in verse 17, you can count them some say there are 7 of them, some say there are 8. But here's the important thing. It's defined, and it's defined as being pure and peaceable and gentle, willing to yield, that means reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without hypocrisy. That is what light looks like in the world,
That's
Grant.
right.
And it's easy to forget that and turn it into more of a religious kind of outward
Absolutely.
observance. But these are the practical ways we can be light in the world.
Absolutely. And since light always represents truth. Truth is reality. Pilate asked Yeshua, "What is truth?" Well, truth is reality. And we have a hard time seeing reality. We just see the parts of it we want to see, and we don't see the parts we don't. Well, the menorah was balanced. For every branch that came out to the one side, there was a balancing branch that came out to the other. So the menorah stood upright.
It absolutely represents a balanced life between the physical and the spiritual.
And the thing is, there's so many truths in Scripture, but what we want to do is take the ones we like and ignore the ones we don't. And so we have an imbalanced menorah.
And then the light isn't as beautiful.
No, it isn't. And we have to expend all of our strength trying to keep our menorah standing upright. Just a real quick example. There's, the Calvinists and the Arminians have had this ongoing centuries-long theological battle as to whether God is absolutely sovereign or if we have free will. Well, which is true? Well, they both are. The Bible teaches that God runs the world. He's absolute sovereign. On the other hand, we're responsible for every decision we make. And you think, well, how does that work? How can those both be true? I don't know, but they are. And if I believe both of those, then my faith in God is strong, yet my sense of responsibility is healthy. And I want to be wise in how to make decisions. So we have two truths. They're opposite truths, opposite branches, but they balance each other. But if you just hold to one of those and not the other, then your whole life's out of balance. Your whole life's out of whack.
Well, that's the powerful truth, that if I realize that my soul, which is that holy place where the menorah should be maintained and kept in balance and elevated and always protected and guarded, that's going to affect my thoughts, because that's what my soul is. And my thoughts and my emotions are the thing that is going to affect my words and my actions, because we know that when we change our internal perspective, we change reality. That is what affects reality, right?
That's right.
And that's why people who deny the truth, their reality is so distorted that it creates kind of an insanity.
Yes. We were talking about insanity. Seems like throughout this week, we've been talking about it.
It keeps coming up because we see so much lack.
Yeah, it's we live in this woke culture. And the Bible defines what woke is in the book of Judges. And it's this: every man did what was right in his own eyes.
Oh my gosh.
That's a woke culture. And but people lost their minds. It was insanity. What's interesting is when we read about the manna, let's see, it's in chapter, help me out, Robin, it's in chapter 11, I believe.
Okay.
Yes. And the people wanted the
quail,
the cucumbers, melons, herbs, onions, and garlic, leeks and garlic. They all need breath mints at that point, I'm sure. But God gave them manna. And it says in verse 7, now the manna was like coriander seeds, color was like the color of badolic. And then talks about how the people prepare it.
Right.
And then it says in verse 8, its taste was like the taste of dough kneaded with oil. Another place it tells us its taste was like honey. Now that word for taste, the word ta'am, is also the word that's translated sanity.
That's
in the Bible.
fascinating.
Yeah. And we're, in Psalm 34, it's a psalm of David when he disguised his ta'am, his sanity.
Wow.
And insanity means that your ability to discern and to judge and to assess things around you. And Proverbs says that a beautiful woman who lacks ta'am is like a pig with a gold ring in its snout.
Yeah, a weird juxtaposition of things that don't belong.
And when I'm thinking about this crazy COVID, this man-made disease that has swept the world, and what is one of the lasting results? People lose their taste.
Yeah.
And
their sense of smell and taste, and you can no longer discern what's what.
Yeah. So it's a physical picture of a spiritual reality.
Right.
And in this crazy world, and I don't understand how COVID and all the insanity and wokeness interweave, but it's like people have physically lost their sense of taste and smell, discernment. It's right along with losing their ability to discern what's right and what's wrong, what's true and what's not. And we just are seeing what was considered common sense become a rarity today.
Well, I was also returning to the opening remarks where we were describing the menorah. It's believed that it was placed on a step, so you had to step up and actually reach up and be elevated in order to maintain that light. And I was sharing with you this week, I was reading somewhere about how negativity and sadness and melancholy even, and just a sense of indifference, it's heavier and weightier, and it's so much closer to the ground. It's much easier to embrace that. And it takes energy and a sense of, I will step up. I will do this. You can't settle into complacency and indifference. You have to reach higher. And when you reach higher, then you can touch the joy and the optimism and the truth. But it's getting fewer and fewer people around me are willing to step up and reach high. And it affects me sometimes. And then I start to fall into that complacent, indifferent attitude. Because Grant, let's think about it. The people had just not so long before this portion had this incredible encounter with the divine, with God. And they knew what he said, and they said, we hear you, we're gonna do it. And before long,
they forgot it all.
They're craving Egypt, and then they're wanting flesh. They're wanting to eat, things that are different from the beautiful manna and the provision that he's given them. What is it about our nature that can come out of the gate strong and before long say, all right, that's done. I don't feel it anymore. It doesn't matter anymore. What is that?
It's fallen human nature. It's that animal side of us taking precedence over the spiritual side of us. In
a marriage, one of the things that I've noticed through the years is when I see a spouse treating the other with indifference, I know that things are growing cold between them. And often it can almost become unsalvageable. And that complacency and indifference, I think, is what the people started to allow into their hearts regarding God.
Well, it's interesting too, in 11:4 it says, the rabble that was among them cultivated a craving. I love that phrase. In other words, we all have physical desires because we have animal bodies, right? So we get hungry for certain things, or we lust for certain things, and that's part of this animal flesh. We're not to walk in the lust of the flesh, we're to walk in the spirit. But what can happen is the enemy, the moment that spark of fleshly desire comes along, that craving, he comes along to suggest that we're never going to be happy unless we cultivate that, unless we have that. And when you're around with other people who are going through the same thing, you can begin to work one another up into cultivating a craving. It's and I wrote down here, craving what we do not have makes us despise what we do have.
And then the murmuring is so contagious.
It is.
And that started to spread through the people. And then I think they took on to themselves this mantle of victimhood, don't you think?
Yeah.
And then they started to be accusers.
Of course.
And that is the typical pattern.
Feeling sorry for themselves and...
You know, he wants us to learn to walk through this life dressed in strength and dignity. And there's an author, her name is Edith Eger, and she is a survivor, a real survivor on many levels, but she literally survived the Holocaust. And so her voice has credibility because she has suffered many things in her life, but she chooses to reach high.
Yes.
She elevates her soul, and she's a light, and she inspires many people. And she says, I'm going to read a short paragraph from her book called The Gift. It says, "This is the first tool for moving out of victimhood. Approach whatever is happening with a gentle embrace. It doesn't mean you have to like it, but when you stop fighting and resisting, you have more energy and imagination at the ready to figure out what now and to move forward instead of just being stuck nowhere. To discover what you want and need in this moment and where you really want to go from here."
Yeah.
And so the people's journey was interrupted by this attitude of victimhood, complacency, indifference.
Yeah.
It's a warning to us.
It is. And, you know, and it's almost comical in 11:5 where the Israelites are saying, "We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt free of charge."
Yeah.
Did they forget that
As
they were
if-
slaves?
Yeah.
They were slaves. They had the whip cracked over them every day. They were slaves.
They began to lose their sanity.
Yeah. So everything about their present life was misery, and everything about their miserable past life just became, it was wonderful.
You know, Grant, I can't help but mention, I didn't plan to go here, but recently we had a good friend visit, and
I was just thinking of her.
she's a beautiful person, and I always say she's one of my most
Our
favorite
heroes.
brave women in my life. And she has every reason to just cave and cower and become indifferent toward the things that God has said is true because she has suffered. And she has been victimized, but she hasn't taken on
But she
that
refuses
identity.
to be a victim.
And you know what she kept saying to me? Because early in her life, she chose to just really give in to despair, and she ended up in a psych ward for a while, and she had to really fight her way back from that haze. And she then began to guard the light in her soul and to build it and to elevate the truth in her life. And I've watched her work hard to do this. And the thing that she kept saying when we were visiting last week, she said, "Robin, sanity is a choice."
Yes, I love that.
She said, "I have to choose it because every day I could give in to despair and say this is too much. And I want to go back to just when things seemed easier."
Yeah, it was an amazing visit when you shared that conversation with me. I thought, wow, she really gets it. She's one of our heroes.
So earlier, you and I were talking about how we are to not only maintain but to guard. Where are those two principles presented to us in this portion?
That's right in chapter 8, right at the very end.
Okay.
The last verse 26. And it talks about the Levite, and when they turn 50 years old, their position and their work status changes. It says, "He shall minister with his brethren in the tent of meeting to guard the charge, but work," the service is the word there,
Right.
shall not he not perform. So since he's this age, he doesn't do the laborious work of the Levite anymore, but he continues to guard.
So they're
safeguard.
serving and guarding.
Yeah. So those two words jumped out at me, and the two Hebrew words that are used there, which are shamor, to guard, and avod, which is to serve, are the exact same two words that God commanded Adam to do in the garden.
That's amazing.
They are to serve and to guard the garden.
Do you know what amazes me about? Well, a lot of things amaze me about it. But we've talked about how when God gave us the tabernacle here in its physical form on earth, it's like Eden invading our creation again.
The tabernacle was a portable Garden of Eden.
Wow.
The tree of life was in the Holy of Holies because the Torah is the tree of life. And the entrance was to the east, The way to the Holy of Holies is guarded by cherubim. I mean, everything about it is a picture of the Garden of Eden. And the tabernacle is the way, as you said, God and Garden of Eden are invading the earth. He's once again making his presence accessible in a limited way, but he's beginning to open the way to the garden. And so the Levites who serve the tabernacle have the same work that Adam had, to serve and to guard the garden, the tabernacle.
We have the same work to do.
Because we're tabernacles.
And we are to serve
Yeah, exactly
and to
right.
guard the thing that he has entrusted to
Yes.
us, correct?
Yeah.
You know, like I said a minute ago, it's easy to have a directive from him, either in his word or in our own spirit where we hear his voice. We need both. And you come out of the gate strong. You know, when the people left Egypt, they were pretty pumped.
Yeah.
And they crossed over and had that incredible, they were pretty pumped.
Yeah.
And then they encounter Sinai. They're pretty, but the journey became a burden to them, and they just sort of lost their ability to see the divine, and they grew weary in well-doing. And I was thinking about this, and I went online yesterday, because in America we have this very popular place where serious hikers like to go and conquer this 2,200 mile long trail. It takes the Appalachian Trail, and it takes for about 4 to 6 months to complete if you can manage it. It's not for the faint at heart.
Yeah, it goes from what, the
Georgia?
south of Georgia all the way up into Maine, all the way up the.
And we've met people
south
who've
north.
attempted it, and we've met a few who've actually done it. But what I found fascinating is that out of every 4 people who intend to finish, only 1 out of 4 finish. And I found it fascinating to read about those who were successful, and they said, you have to want it more than anything.
Yeah.
And you can't let the discomfort along the way, or even the injuries along the way, deter you. You have to remember your goal and keep moving toward it, and
That's
then you
right.
can succeed. And I thought 75% of the people who absolutely have the intention of finishing that hike quit along the way.
Yeah. Well, that is called the wilderness, the midbar, everything about the wilderness. And I've said this so many times before. All of us go through the wilderness. It's the only way to get to the land of promise. So you go from this thing where there's this great experience with God and you're pumped, I'm ready to go through.
And that's enthusiasm.
Yeah,
and
but that's emotion.
And we need enthusiasm in life.
Of course.
But it waxes and wanes, and then we have to use common sense, don't we?
But we have to go through the wilderness.
We do.
Where our wills are strengthened, our faith is strengthened, and we learn to walk in the Spirit instead of just the emotion of the flesh. And that is what's necessary. Only those people who make it through the wilderness are permitted to come into the land of promise, where you really have the fruitfulness, the combat, the victories, and the joy, and you reach full stature. And that's what I want.
And that is elevating the light.
Yes.
And I know that for a hiker, I've talked to a few, I'm like, how do you do it? And they say, you can't think about the miles ahead. And you can't be overwhelmed by that. You have to think of the next step.
Every next step.
Every next step. And that has become one of my favorite mantras, Grant. It's like, what is the next right thing I'm supposed to do? And just do that.
Yeah. And let go of the ego. Quit comparing yourself to others. And we're going to come up to Korah. I've been studying a couple Torah portions ahead, Korah. And here's a guy who had a lofty position among the people of Israel. But he wanted more. He had this ego that just wanted more. And
or you think you're entitled to.
And as a result, the earth opened up and swallowed him and his family. You know, last week I mentioned this poem by my mom's childhood friend, and it was so sweet. At my dad's funeral, we went to Tennessee and took Mom, and she got to meet Margaret Swan for the last time, because about a year later, Mom died. Then after that, Margaret passed away. They're both in their late 80s. But Margaret wrote some poems, and my cousin Joe Swan in Tennessee collected them together and printed them. And I referred to this, so I just want to read it, because here, Margaret Swan, who was a housewife, a farmer's wife.
Always
in
doing the
Tennessee,
next right thing.
Just doing what's right. And she wrote this poem. I hope I can make it through without breaking up here. But this is what it says. When I am gone, not much to be said. She cleaned the house and made the bed. Some do great things, but me, instead, I cleaned the house and made the bed. God must have known what I could do and gave me the task he wanted to. He spoke to me, my child, he said, keep cleaning my houses and making my beds.
Why is that so special?
Because she was humble.
And faithful to the end. And her life was beautiful. Everybody who knew her,
she was a light.
Her life was so bright.
Yeah.
Is still bright. It's still bright.
And that's who my mom was too.
Yes.
That's who my mother was. And they did the things that God called them to do. They cleaned the house, they made the beds, they raised their kids, and they had to deny themselves and take up their cross. And they bore the yoke of Messiah, and they were just faithful. They were just faithful, and they walked through life with strength and dignity. They were women of valor.
Women of valor.
And so their lives here, they lived, to their late 80s here. But compared to the glory in the world to come, which is eternal, there's no comparison. As you were talking earlier, we're having this discussion, I just happened to think back to, it seems like every time I read anything from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, who lived centuries ago, one of the things he would always say is we need to lift ourselves out of the mud. Pull yourself up out of the mud.
Elevate.
Our bodies are made of mud. Pull yourself up out of the mud. Beha'alotecha. Elevate yourself to the lights and to serve the light, to be light. And yet we love wallowing in the mud. And what animal loves to wallow in the mud?
A very
Pigs.
unkosher one, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And let's not be insane. We are made in God's image. Let's bear his image. And let's arise and elevate ourselves to serve the light, to be lights, and to allow our lives to be consumed as they are transformed into light.
And when you were reading that poem, I was just picturing a house, not only her life, but her physical home, where her family and friends would come and be together. It was a sanctuary of peace.
It was.
It was a peaceful place and a place full of light, because light and peace are coexistent.
Yes.
And I was thinking this morning, in contrast, in Proverbs 17, it says it's better to have just a dry crust of bread in a place where there's shalom and quietness than in a place where you're feasting on fancy food, but there's strife and contention, and it's not full of light and peace. So when you're guarding and serving and sweeping the floor and making the bread and loving the people around you, it is a feast.
It is. It is. I'm going to remind you that next time you complain about the bed needing to be made.
Well,
she just punched me, folks. I want you to know she just punched me in the arm.
Let's go ahead and talk about some of the other things, because our time is always running out.
2 minutes.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, we need to talk about why what Miriam did was such a detriment to the congregation, and what that warning means for us.
Okay.
So
you want to start?
Well, where are we in the chapter?
It's going to be right at the end of 12. Yes.
Well, we know that Miriam valued the truth, and she definitely came out strong, leading the people in a dance, and she cared about the sanctity of the family, and she assumed that she had some insight and understanding about her brother Moses, and perhaps she was a little too familiar with the one that God had appointed as authority and his mouthpiece to the people. And she brought correction to him, but not directly to him, to others. And she murmured against him.
Yes.
And I mean, we can talk about what's likely to be the source of what she was saying and all of that. I don't think it matters. What matters is whether it was true or not. She diminished him.
Yeah.
And she murmured against him and committed Lashon Hara. And the consequences for that, for her, was that she was struck with Zaras, correct? And then she was put outside the camp. And this is interesting.
7 days.
For 7 days.
For 7
and there's
days.
that number 7 again. And I jotted in my own journal, it was as if it took 7 days for her to relight those 7 lamps that had started to fade, because that's what happens when we commit evil speech. It dims the light.
And consider the dynamics, the family dynamics here. It was so natural for her to be able to talk about her little brother, Moses. She was the big sister.
Right.
She was the one who was very instrumental in saving Moses' life when their mother put baby Moses in a basket and sent it down the river. And Miriam's the one who followed along and then told Pharaoh's daughter, oh, I can find a wet nurse to help with this baby.
She served and she guarded.
So she kind of saw Moses, little brother Moses, as being, this is my little brother. He needs me to take care of him. But then when she speaks against him, what does God tell her? Verse in 12:7. Let's start with 6. It says, hear now my words. If there shall be prophets among you, in a vision shall I, Adonai, make myself known to him. In a dream shall I speak with him. Not so my servant Moses. In my entire house, he's the trusted one. Mouth to mouth do I speak to him, in a clear vision, not in riddles. At the image of Adonai does he gaze. Why did you not fear to speak against my servant Moses? So he's saying, yeah, Miriam, you may be the big sister, but in my house, Moses is the one of a kind. He is my servant. How dare you speak against him?
Right.
And, you know, we have one dynamic we have in our families, our communities, but the spiritual dynamic can be quite different. And so someone who's younger than me might be in a position of authority over me, and I have to respect that.
Yeah.
So we need to relearn how to walk in spiritual reality, not just in the familiar physical setup that we've known all our lives. We have to retrain ourselves and learn how to walk in light.
And what happened as a result of what she did, which we've all been guilty of, and many of us have even been the recipient of.
Oh, yes.
And so the whole congregation was held back.
The whole congregation held back for a week.
For a whole week.
Yeah.
And she was isolated outside the camp.
Yeah.
Until
How humiliating.
It was humiliating.
Yeah.
And she had to experience that isolation.
Yes.
I have a book called Shabbat Delights, and it's put out by Hannah Weisberg, and it spoke to this. It talks about the portions, and I'm just going to read this, Grant, because it's meaningful, and I think it's so practical and helpful. It says, it's so easy to judge another by the prism of our own glasses. Even the great Miriam, who only wanted to create a better world, looked at her brother's conduct and misjudged him. We learn from Miriam that despite our best intentions in trying to rectify a situation or in trying to help another improve, we are never seeing the full picture. It looks like what she's doing is wrong. It seems as if it is diametrically opposite to everything you know and do. Look again. Don't go speaking behind her back, even if you are trying to help. That's what we think to ourselves when we look at other people sometimes. It's like, well, you know, we need to bring correction to this. And this lesson is so important and so valuable and something that is so easy to slip on that we need to be reminded about it every single day. And that is why every single day in our prayer book, at the conclusion of our daily prayers, we begin our prayer saying, my God, guard my tongue from evil and my lips from speaking deceitfully. But from those who do it for me, even, let my soul be
Yeah.
silent.
Yeah.
Let it be as dust.
And what's so interesting, at the beginning of the Amidah, the prayers, we say, Adonai, open my lips that my mouth may declare your praise.
Right.
We need his help to
Elevate.
praise him, but then we need his help to shut up
Right.
and not complain about others. It's interesting, the whole Amidah
dynamic.
is bookended
By
between-
speech.
Yeah, speech, and asking God to help us to speak and to shut up. We need help with both. So, well, that's a good way to end this. So, there's so much we had planned to share, but we never get through it all.
We never,
do we?
we're always
Never.
kind of curious about what we're going to say, right?
Wonder how this one's going to turn out. But what's said has been said, and I speak for Robin and me when I say we just hope and pray that there's something in all this jumble of words that's a blessing to you, and it's brought some light into your life, and will assist you and
Well, it never
into
ceases.
being a light.
It never ceases to amaze me when I stop to ponder how these thousands of years ago, these appointed
Yes.
souls take a journey, and it's so powerful, and it's
our journey
recorded,
too.
and it's our journey too.
is.
And here we are sharing this with people we might not even meet in this physical
Yes.
world, and we're all on this journey together, and we're all on this journey individually, and we need all the truth we can get so that we can
That's for
remain
sure.
sane, right?
That's right. Choose sanity.
Choose
it's
sanity.
a choice.
It's a choice.
And with that, we want to wish you shalom and may God bless.
Shalom.
Thank you for joining us for today's teaching. If the work of Torah Today Ministries has touched your life, please consider making a donation or sponsoring an upcoming video. As a video sponsor, you'll have an exclusive opportunity to memorialize a family member, celebrate a special event, or simply support the ongoing creation of similar content. Your tax-deductible contribution helps ensure that our teachings continue to reach all who are longing for truth. Click the link or visit our website to learn more.